Hi everyone, we have been doing culture, the effect of culture on human beings and their behavior and personality. So in this class we are going to learn that how cultural dimensions have an effect on the behavior of a person. So let's understand what is a dimension and what is cultural dimension. So basically dimensions are the trends of a behavior in a given society, or let's say different parameters that are there. So in a society, in a culture, there are different kind of dimensions, and we are going to see the cultural dimensions are that these parameters that are there, these trends that are there, how these trends in a given society or the value of the dimensions, how it is affecting the behavior of a person. So majorly we are going to talk about Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Here in the diagram you can see that these are all the dimensions, cultural dimensions that we are going to study and how it affects our behavior. So let's do one by one. Very first one is power distance index. What does distance index means? It is that how much a given culture gives value to the status and authority in the social hierarchy. Extent to which culture gives respect to authority and status. So basically, how a culture treats the hierarchy, social hierarchy or the power hierarchy of a society. More the distance is, or let's say if somebody is scoring, if a culture is scoring more on power distance index, it means it accepts more of hierarchy. So the power is distributed to certain set of people with higher status, higher authority, and lesser to the other class, to the lower class. So there is a lot of levels of hierarchy here, lot of levels of power and authority here, and the society accepts this kind of a hierarchy in the society. Okay, so this is what they are higher on power in distance index. Second is lower power distance index. Lower power distance index means that the hierarchy is not much accepted. The power is distributed almost equally among all the class people. So there is not much of hierarchy. There is no, higher level people, lower level people. So the distribution, the equal rights and how they treat people, how the power is distributed, all these is distributed very much equally amongst the people, irrespective of their class, irrespective of their status. Second dimension is individualism versus collectivism. Now there are some cultures who are more collectivist in nature. They have everything referring to as we. They consider as people maybe of their family, of their apartment, of their religion, of their own culture. So it is more of what we think as a family, we think as a group. So our inclination is more towards the thinking, the thought processes of we rather than I. Individualism on the other end are the cultures where it is more of an I, individualism. So I don't care what other people think. This is what I want. This is my opinion. This is what my thought process is. So it is very individualistic in nature. The third dimension is uncertainty ambiguity index. What does this mean? So first let's understand what is the terminology ambiguity here means. Ambiguity here means that how strict society is towards people's behavior, to the society's behavior, and how much they are open to change. So ambiguity means how much they are unconventional, how much they are open to the change that is there in the society. This is ambiguity. Now tolerance of ambiguity would mean that a society is not having too many strict rules and they are very open for change. So they are more tolerant in nature. So a society that is high on uncertainty ambiguity index, they are likely to be very rigid. They like more traditional thoughts. They don't like too many changes. They dislike or disown people in the society who are more into unconventional ideas and try to hold on to the very rigid beliefs and attitudes. This is to be done. This is how you should be wearing the clothes. Or maybe, particular gender should work and the other gender should not work. you can't go alone out if you're of this particular gender. So, women not going out, women not doing this or that. So there are certain thought processes that means they are higher on the end of uncertainty ambiguity index. Anybody who is lower on the index means they're more open to change. They're more tolerant towards the conventional rules, and they're very unconventional. They are easy with the changes. They are not very traditional. The next dimension is masculinity versus femininity. Now, in cultural dimensions, it is not what we call as masculine or being feminine. It's quite different. So, any society culture which is more masculine in nature means they focus more on competition, on achievement, on wealth. If a society is more feminine in nature, it means they are more into cooperation, more into relationship, more into harmony, more into quality of life. Now, listen to this carefully, that any given culture, if it is masculine in nature, that applies for both men and women. That both men and women are very competitive, very ambitious, and much into wealth. If a given society is feminine in nature, that means that cultural people, both men and women, are inclined more towards relationships, cooperation, and good quality of life. Next cultural dimension is long-term versus short-term orientation. This particular dimension is linked with your focus on either on future or connection with the past. So any culture that is more focused towards the long term orientation means they are more focusing on the future. So they are not very traditional in nature. They don't hold on to the past. They focus more on the development, more on the change, more what is coming in the future. Any culture who has short-term orientation, it means they like to stay with their roots. They are more into the traditions. They are more connected with their past rather than future. Next cultural dimension is indulgent versus restraint. It means cultures who are more into indulgent, they are very open, they are not very strict, there are no strict rigid social norms, and they are free to do what they want to do. So they have a lot of openness in accepting the new things, and they can follow their heart basically. And any culture who is into restraint, it means that they are more into rigid, strict rules, social norms, and they are not open to do what they want to do. They have to be restricted by the society. So they are very rigid social norms, strict social norms for them. Studying cultural dimensions are very, very important because of international diplomacy, international business, and all that. Nowadays, we have already studied in the introduction of social psychology that how the whole planet is becoming so globalized. When so much of globalization is happening, people are migrating, we are moving from one culture to the other or one country to the other, and we really want to grow. There is a lot of mixing that is happening. So when that is happening, we are moving, we are migrating. It is very, very important that you understand the cultural norms, these cultural dimensions. Because if you will not understand these cultural dimensions, you might not be able to respect or understand the culture of the other society, of the other country, and you might fail in business then. So that is why it is very, very important. I'll just give you an example here. For example, Korea is high on power distance index. America is lower on power distance index. What does this mean? So let's say a person of a lower distance power index goes to a higher place. Okay, there he might feel that, I have to take consent of everyone. Let's take a joint decision and, for the company. And then if I am the boss and I am coming from a lower distance index, a power distance index, I might feel that let's take a joint decision for the company. If I do that, you know what people are going to think? People from higher power distance index, they are going to think that why you are consulting us? You are the boss. You have to take a decision. Why you are talking to us? It is not our job. It is your job. And then they might not respect you as a leader, which is a bad thing. And then you might fail as a leader. On the other hand, if a person from a higher power distance index goes to a lower one, they might, take the decision all by themselves. In that case, people from lower power distance index might think, what kind of a boss is he? He didn't even consult us. He took the decision for the company all by itself. And again, this might fail you as a leader. So that is the reason it is very important when we are dealing with people of different culture, when we are doing business on an international level, we must understand these different cultural dimensions so that we can deal with different cultural people in a very different way. Let's understand what is ASH paradigm. ASH paradigm means about the experiments, the series of experiments on conformity. How people think and how group thinking has an effect on a person. What does that mean? What is group thinking? Group thinking is when other people are taking a certain kind of a decision, other people are thinking in a certain way. I feel that I will also think the same way. I also need to sync with them. I can't think differently. I can't be the odd one out. So in order to avoid the odd one out, I am influenced by what others are saying, what others are thinking. That means I'm influenced by group thinking. So what is conformity? Conformity means that when a culture is working on something, how people in a certain culture, are they group thinking or are they not? So let's study the difference between individualistic societies and collectivist societies. How people from individualistic society and collectivist society, how they have an effect of group thinking. Conformity affects these people from different cultures. This study was given by Berry, 1967. It was carried out on a study on conformity based on the ASH paradigm, which I just now taught you, with Temne from Sierra Leone, a collectivist society based on farming, and Intuits from Baffin Bay, an individualistic society based on hunting, to see if the dimensions play a role on the level of conformity. So the study goes like this. For this sample, Berry used 3 distinctly different cultures. First, the Temne of Sierra Leone, a collectivist society that is based on rice farming, and then the individualists Inuit people of Baffin Island in Canada, which survives by hunting and fishing. Each group was made up of people who had never had a Western education and maintained the traditional way of life, and people who were in transition, either have Western education or having Western employment. Lastly, he used Scots as a reference group. The control group was made up of both urban and rural Scots. There were approximately 120 participants in each group. Each individual was brought into a room by him or herself. For the test, they were given a set of 9 lines. They were asked to match the line below that most closely matched the line on the top. These were the 2 practice tests to make sure that the directions were understood. The instructions were read in their own language by a native interpreter. After the first 2 trials, there were 4 more trials. On the 3rd trial, they heard the following directions. Here is another sheet with the 9 lines on it, 1 here on the top and 8 beneath it. This time I am going to give you a hint. Most Temne or Inuit or Scottish people say this line. Experimenter pointed to a designated line is equal in length to the one at the top. Which one do you say? For the 3rd trial, the correct answer was given. For trials 4 to 6, the wrong response was given. The dependent variable was the number of lines that their answer was away from the correct line. So, the Temne, which is the collectivist culture, had a much higher rate of conformity when told what other Temne believed, even though it was incorrect. The Inuits, on the other hand, had even a lower rate of conformity than the Scots. Interestingly, there was no significant difference within groups. That means it made no difference whether the participants were living the traditional life or were highly exposed to Western culture. It appears that when the participants were reminded of the cultural identity by being told that another member of their culture had already given a response, the cultural dimension played a more significant role in an individual's level of conformity than their current relationship with that cultural identity. So one does have to be careful, however, with applying the idea of dimensions too casually. Hofstede warns against the ecological fallacy that is when one looks at two different cultures, it should not be assumed that two members from two different cultures must be different from one another, or that a single member of a culture will also always demonstrate the dimensions which are the norm of that culture. These concepts simply give psychologists a way to generalize about cultures in order to better discuss the role that culture plays in behavior. However, we have to be careful of stereotyping, recognizing that these expectations of the behavior of a member of a different culture opens up the possibility of stereotype threat. So Hofstede said very rightly that we should not stereotype. Stereotyping can be dangerous and not ethical. Because when we stereotype, we are saying that every single person of this culture is likely to behave in such manner. No, it is not always that. Maybe two different people of the same culture can be very different. Or two people from different cultures can be very same. So there are definitely individual similarities and individual differences. We should not stereotype. But why we are learning cultural dimensions? We are learning cultural dimensions just to understand that in general, what can we have a bit of expectation at the back of the mind? What can we expect from the person, that how they are going to react to a certain situation? So this is just a general thing and cannot be applied to every specific person of that culture. Now, I hope you understood the study. Now let's do the second study so that IB students can write in their answers.
Buzz 1989 wanted to test evolution-based assumptions about human mate selection in a large cross-cultural sample. Mate preference would differ in individualistic and collectivistic society. The research aim was to test the above predictions by investigating the different preferences of each gender and culture on heterosexual mate preferences. There were 10,047 participants from 33 countries and 37 different cultures, with a mean age of participants ranged from 16 to 28. The samples, however, are not representative of each culture, as generally speaking, less educated and lower levels of socioeconomic status were not well represented in the samples. The total 37 samples do, however, represent an incredibly diverse range of geographic, political, ethnic, cultural, political, and racial backgrounds, as was the largest sample of mate selection at the time of study. Participants were asked to rate 18 specific traits as 0 to 3. 0 is the most undesirable and 3 is indispensable. Examples of traits include good looks, chastity, ambition, industriousness, sociability. Biographical information was collected on the participants and information on preferences regarding marriage. That is, for example, age to get married, age of preferred partner, etc. They were also given 13 characteristics and they were asked to rank them in order from 1 to 13. Examples of these characteristics were good earning capacity and physical attractiveness. The materials were translated using 3 translators who first translated into the language required for the relevant culture, then back translated into English, and then the third translator fixed the differences between the two translations. So the results go like this. The results gathered supported Buzz hypothesis. Females from 36 out of 37 cultures valued good financial prospects higher than males. Males, however, preferred mates that were younger, while females preferred males who were older. This result was cross-checked with other data and it showed that on average, men are older than women when couples are married. There was also moderate support for the gender, chastity, loyalty hypothesis. Males from 62% of the cultures valued this more than females. Interestingly, men from collectivist cultures tended to place higher values on chastity and domestic skills than individualistic cultures. Women from collectivist cultures tended to place higher importance on ambition, social status, and financial prospects than women from individualistic cultures. So the conclusion goes like this: evolution and behavior. Because men across cultures had similar preferences, and so did the women, it suggests that preferences have a biological basis and are not a product of culture. Because all of the cultures are different, these results were similar to Buzz's hypothesis. Perhaps we find particular qualities and features attractive because they give our offspring the highest chance of survival in the future. Culture and behavior. Because there are some differences in preference across culture, these could be explained by looking at the particular cultural values associated with individualistic and collectivist cultures. For example, men from individualistic cultures might place less emphasis on domestic skills because they have raised to be more independent and look after themselves. Collectivist cultures also tend to be more traditional with more defined gender roles. Example, men work and provide for the family while the women take care of domestic duties. With stricter gender roles comes from more preference for the qualities that you would make someone successful in that role. You might be able to see why Buzz's work is not without controversy.
Now let's do one more study, a supporting study which supports short-term versus long-term orientation. That is the another cultural dimension that we are going to talk about. So the IB students have to write a specific knowledge about what is short-term and long-term orientation in their cultural dimension in their answer, and then they can write the supporting study.
So the supporting study for short-term and long-term orientation is given by Levine et al. 1995. Love and marriage in 11 cultures. Romantic love seems to be universal. The importance of love for marriage, however, seems not to be universally accepted. In the majority of world cultures, marriage is arranged by family members, not by the bride and groom. Romantic love in cultures with strong kinship networks and extended family ties is seen as irrelevant or even disastrous for marriages because they disrupt the tradition of family-approved, often arranged marriage choices. Some studies have shown that love is more important for marriage in cultures where economic interdependence between spouses is weak. In American society, loves to be an essential precondition for marriage. So the aim of the study was to examine the cross-cultural generality of the importance placed on romantic love in marriage decisions and to identify predictors and consequences of these differences. Main hypothesis was collectivism will be negatively related to the importance placed on romantic love. So the participants were 497 males and 673 female students of liberal arts in cities from 11 countries. India, Pakistan, Thailand, Mexico, United States, England, Japan, Australia, Philippines, and Hong Kong. So the procedure was for measurement of the importance of romantic love. A questionnaire was used. Participants were asked 3 questions about their beliefs about the importance of love in marriage. Predictors and consequences of romantic love. The relationships of several social and economic characteristics of nations to beliefs about the importance of romantic love were examined. Individualism, collectivism, economic status, marriage, and family statistics. So the results showed that the individualistic countries were much more likely to rate love as essential for the establishment of marriage and the disappearance of love as a sufficient reason for ending marriage. Countries with large GDP showed this tendency even strongly. Countries assigning greater importance to romantic love for the establishment of marriage had higher marriage rates, lower fertility rates, and higher divorce rates. Divorce rates were highly correlated with the belief that the disappearance of love warranted the dissolution of marriage. So the conclusion is there were strong cross-cultural differences in the perceived importance of love as a prerequisite for establishing and maintaining marriages. Western and Westernized nations showed greatest importance there with a link to economic development as well. The method used was questionnaire. methodological considerations were they provide relatively cheap, quick, and efficient ways of obtaining large amounts of information from a large sample of people. Respondents may lie due to social desirability. Correlation is not and cannot be taken to imply causation, even if there is a strong association between two variables, cannot assume that one causes the other, thus meaning that there is low internal validity. It allows the researcher to investigate naturally occurring variables that may be unethical or impractical to test experimentally. It allows the researcher to clearly and easily see if there is a relationship between variables. And alternative explanations is that based on the possibility of lying due to social desirability, the participants may have answered untruthfully to the questions or misinterpreted the questions because they want to present a positive image of themselves.
So if you liked my video, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to write anything in the comments below if you have not understood or if you enjoyed the video. Please do write in the comments and I would be happy to help you with providing more supporting studies and counter arguments.